Hello everybody and welcome to this special video reviewing my 5 favourite reviews I've done in the Deanstructor Reviews Doctor Who strand. Now, as you may know, the War Games last month's review was the 50th review I've done in the strand, and I thought it's time to pick my 5 favourites so far. Now, they're not based on TARDIS ratings, they're just based on overall interest and my enjoyment of each of the reviews. 2 of them were easy, and I think you might figure out what one of them actually is already. The other 3 were difficult, and I had to go down to a short list of 10 to go through. And once I picked them, I was happy with them. So I hope you are too. It's about an hour and a half's worth of footage. It is a premiere video on YouTube, so if you are watching it at the time the premiere launches, you'll be able to leave a comment with me in the chat. I'll be here moderating all the way through, so hopefully you'll be able to say hi at that point. If you're seeing this afterwards, don't worry, the live chat will be available for you guys to see if you wish. Plus, you can also leave a comment down below of your thoughts and feelings. The 5 videos will also be listed as my listed in a wee playlist that I'll put up here and in the description down below, especially for this upload. And yeah, I hope you enjoy them. Thanks for watching this. Thanks for taking part. Leave your comments on the side, of course. That way. And yeah, here we go. Here is number 5. The Green Death is the last recorded and broadcast story of Season 10, which started with the 3 Doctors. It's the penultimate season of Jon Pertwee's tenure as the Doctor, and as always, I have in front of me here the television companion. I'm going to read the plot synopsis of the story before we go any further, so here we go. Unit is called in after a miner from the Welsh village of Clan Fairfax is found dead, his skin glowing bright green. Joe joins forces with the local environmental group led by Professor Clifford Jones, while the Doctor investigates the nearby plant of a company called Global Chemicals. They discover that the mine workings are full of giant maggots and green slime, both lethal to the touch, that have been produced by chemical waste pumped from the Global plant. Stevens, the director of Global, has been taken over by the Boss, Biomorphic Organizational Systems Supervisor, a computer with a will of its own. The Boss plans to seize power by linking itself to every other major computer in the world, but the Doctor uses a blue crystal, a souvenir from a brief visit to the planet Metebelis 3, to break its hold over Stevens, who then programs it to self-destruct. The maggots, on the point of pupating into giant insects, are destroyed with a type of fungus. Joe falls in love with Professor Jones and decides to leave Unit in order to accompany him on an expedition up the Amazon, and to marry him. The Doctor gives her the blue crystal as an early wedding present. Ah, isn't that nice? This one, as I mentioned in the introduction, is the one with the maggots. It's the one where giant maggots are coming up from mines in the South Wales colliery area. It was, as I say, the last one to be filmed of the season, and for the season, that is. It wasn't the last one in production. The Time Warrior was filmed straight after, but that tended to be a trend that they did because Barry Letts liked to direct an episode a season, so a story a season, so that was his way of getting that done. I can't remember if he did record the Time Warrior, but it gave him scope to do that episode straight off. 2 things to this. It's the technology taking over the world type story, but it's more famous for its environmental parable, which is coming to life now. I mean, for a good 30 years it was on the cusp about your renewable energy and the protein fungus, which happens to be corn, of course, and the fact of windmills and wave power and, you know, reusable energy and the environmental factors, which were very radical for the time in the early 1970s, but have become very, very popular now, and very populist, and becoming more or less the norm as fossil fuels run out and energy runs out and oil is running dry, and it was a very interesting parable and story for that. And of course the effects of environmental pollution, right? A bit strange having giant maggots, but it's an interesting horror story, and the maggots are truly terrifying. It's one of the first stories I remember watching as a child when they did the review of they did an anniversary thing of an episode or story from each Doctor for the 30th anniversary. The stories I remember very vividly are this one and the Caves of Androzani, which I may review in the future. But those two are the two vivid ones I remember of all the Doctors. And the Green Death became one of my favourite stories for a good wee while. And it is one of the earliest stories I have in my VHS collection as well. So it's one I've watched multiple times and I'm very fond of. But let's go into the story itself and go into the actors and the characters involved. Now, of course, you've got Jon Pertwee as the Doctor. He's at the height of his powers here. He's very confident in what he's doing. It's nice to see Jon Pertwee use his comedy skills a little bit, because the third Doctor isn't really known for his comedy stuff. In fact, he doesn't really do much comedy at all, but in this stage he does two impersonations. Impersonation of a milkman to get into Global Chemicals, and impersonation of a cleaning lady to try and keep in Global Chemicals as he gets found out by the security. So that's very fun and very cool to see, and obviously it's showing Jon Pertwee's impressionist strengths coming out there, which is brilliant to see. And Katie Manning, she's nailed the character by now. Jo is the relationship between her and the Doctor is really refined by now. You can see there's a love and a care between them, an understanding. He's definitely a father figure to her, but she still does exactly what she's done for the previous 3 years, and you can see that reinforced in some of the things she was doing when she got introduced to Clifford Jones, and the way that she acts with him, and obviously starts to fall in love with him, but the way that she's ending up talking about the Doctor, and the way she treats him, and the way she's going with Dr. Jones as well, and the way she's been clumsy in that around him is something that obviously she did in the first episode, Terror of the Autons, that she was in. So that's something that she carries on. Nicholas Courtney, as always, has always been very strong and very steady Brigadier. At this point, he knows what he was doing. He can do it off pat. You can see that. He's got a fine balance in this story of trying to work with the establishment through Stevens and Global Chemicals, because they've got a lot of political power, and then obviously helping in the environmental side and knowing about what's happening with the maggots and wants to find out what's happening there. The miners story, the idea of the waste being pumped down the mine, that's very ineffectual, but the fact there was maggots down there and the events they carry on through the story of them trying to prevent the maggots from causing any trouble and then making the situation worse is really good. It's really cool. Then we've got the two main guest actors in here. We've got Jerome Wilms, who plays Stevens, and he is perfectly brilliant as the main antagonist. Very much the cool steel of a businessman. Very enjoyable to watch. You've also got John Dirth, who has the voice of the boss. Very sinister. The character is there. The fact that this machine is merged into Stephen's consciousness in some way and has brought a character and personality and making the maniac personality of its own is very cool, very calculating, very scary, and I love the conversations that he and Stevens have throughout the story. At least I think it's a he. Then we've got other supporting cast. We've got John Levine, Richard Franklin. John Levine just doing a sterling job as always as Benton. He's more there as a shouty man, the lead shouty man in there. It's nice to have Richard Franklin doing a different role for Captain Yates and being the undercover man for once. And he plays a good part. Both of them only in for the last 3 episodes, but they are enjoyable to watch. Then you have the main goodie guest star of Stuart Bevan, who plays Clifford Jones. Now, Stuart Bevan was Katie Manning's partner at the time of the episode, and he put on a Welsh accent, and he is the best of the goodie guest stars that you have in here. Very believable. I love the character. I love the fact he's got that intelligence there, but also is Welsh, and that's something that's quite unique. You don't really see that in Doctor Who of that era, of a character's not got an RP voice that's intelligent. It seems to be an interesting factor, and I really did enjoy it, seeing that. The build-up to the cause of the Green Minders was very good, very atmospheric for the first 2 episodes, and the fact that the miners kept going down and kept getting green because they're inquisitive. At the end of the day, they'll be inquisitive when they're touching the slime and going green. But then you find the maggots at the west seam of the mine, in Clan Fairfax, as it's called, that's good. And I did enjoy it. The CSO scene where the Doctor and the Joe are wading through the maggots is really poorly done, but it's a nice attempt considering what it was. It's too long. It's the precursor of the limitations of CSO, and they make it even worse of the limitations of CSO, or chroma key as we all know it. CSO is what the BBC calls it. They show the limitations of it in Underworld and a later story in the Tom Baker era, but this is where you start to see it a little creaky and it's not working. CSO is used, or chroma key is used a lot to cover a few errors and mistakes. They didn't have enough time to film some of the outside scenes at the slag heap, so they did a still frame picture in the background of all the characters, all the armed unit characters, reacting to what's happening, the other side. So there's a bit of CSO there. The good bit of CSO that worked, and the good bit of chroma key that worked, I keep saying CSO because that's what I'm used to calling it for the Doctor Who stuff. Good bit of chroma key they did do was the chroma key of, it's very simple chroma key, the superimposing of the boss on the oscillator graph that's portraying his voice over the television screen, then the bigger, rounder screen you see in the top floor of Global Chemicals later on. Very well done. It's very creepy, and I do enjoy it a lot. Speaking of design itself, the maggots are very iconic. They're very well put together. They're very scary. They do stand up to scrutiny 40 odd years later. The flying insect scared me as a kid. I didn't enjoy watching that at all. The first couple of times I watched it as an adult, when I started becoming a Doctor Who fan proper, it still gave me the shivers. Still does at times if I'm drunk. But it is a very scary point, very scary situation, very scary monster in my eyes, and it's very freaky. Insects and that always give me the creepy crawlies a little bit as well. The design, the office at Global Chemicals, very kitsch, very early 70s, very of its times. You certainly see some smoking and drinking from Stevens and other members of staff, including the Brigadier, in the office. A very 70s thing about the way high echelons of business work. The brainwashing scenes are great. The headphones that they put on to brainwash, yeah, they're very 70s, but they're very nice in their design and the way that they're used to brainwash. And also you've got the opposite side of the blue crystal, which the Doctor gets in Metabolus 3. That's a basic effect really, but it does make a difference. I do enjoy it. The best bit I did like of the brainwashing bits was when Stephen starts to lose control at the end of episode 1, and Dudley Simpson, who does the music for this, and the music is very standard fare most of the time in this story. It's very Dudley Simpson with its mix of, at this point, synthesizer in his orchestra. But there is an element here. The very good bit is when there's a timpani rolling and hitting a few beats as Stevens is going to the headphones and putting the headphones on to get back to in sync with the boss and his brainwashing. And you see that bit, and you see the timpani in the background, and it's very, very atmospheric, and I did enjoy that bit. Speaking of the Blue Crystal, you've got the Metabolus subplot. Now, this has been a running theme through the whole of the series 10, more or less. The Doctor wanted to get to Metabolus 3, never hitting it. He does in this story. He regrets it. He's getting the Blue Crystal, but he's gone to a hell world, a blue hell world. Well realised, obviously must be filmed either on location at the slag heaps with a lot of blue light, or in Ealing. I'm not sure where, but it does. I did enjoy that part. And I think it was a very good way it was done. Story overall, it moves along okay for a 70s story. Could have been a couple of episodes shorter. I think we could have got to the end by the end of 4 episodes. There's a lot of minions in Global Chemicals being hypnotised and then killing themselves in it. It's really interesting how Stevens tries to prolong any investigations into the mine because he knows he's going to get found out, but there's the ultimate plot there of obviously the computer taking over the world. story you've had a couple of times in Doctor Who up to that point. Most famous of them would be the War Machines with Wotan. That's another story you'll probably get in the future. But overall, I think I'll give this story 4 TARDISes out of 5. Right, last time I did a review with Jamie, I forgot the synopsis from the Television Companion. Luckily this time though, Jamie's managed to find a copy of the same synopsis, so I'm going to let him do the honours and read it out.
The Doctor as an observer and unit are providing security cover at an experimental drilling project designed to penetrate the Earth's crust and release a previously untapped source of energy named Stallman's gas. Professor Stallman dismisses the concerns of the project's executive director, Keith Gold, and exceeds all safety margins in order to expedite the work. Soon, however, the drill head starts to leak an oily green liquid that transforms those who touch it into vicious primeval creatures with a craving for heat. The Doctor is accidentally transported by a partially repaired TARDIS console into a parallel universe where England is ruled by a military dictatorship. The drilling project is at a more advanced stage here, and thwarted by his friends' ruthless alter egos, he is unable to prevent the penetration of the Earth's crust, which ultimately causes the planet's destruction. Escaping back into his own universe, where the drilling is still in progress, the Doctor tries to warn of impending disaster. At first, he is disbelieved, but his words are borne out when the power-crazed Stallman is himself transformed into one of the hideous primordial creatures. The Doctor, aided by consultant Greg Sutton, kills Stallman with ice-cold blasts from fire extinguishers. He's finally able to shut down the drilling with only moments to spare.
So that is the plot synopsis. Thank you very much, Jamie.
No problem.
It's interesting to hear a different voice do it than just me, but there we are. So we'll get down to the nitty-gritty of the story then. What is your overall consensus of this story, Inferno?
It's bloody brilliant. I love it. It's one of my absolute favourite stories. I never tire of watching this story. When I watch it, when it leads up to the end, it still feels tense as it did when I first watched it, even though you know that they're going to succeed and the world's saved, but there's still that tense feeling that doesn't change every time I watch it. I never tire of watching the story. It's one of my absolute favourites. It certainly stands up of the Pertwee era in regards to the story it works. There's a few, like every classic Doctor Who of this era, there's a bit of things you need to disbelieve in regards to the setting and the setup, but it is of a different time. We did discuss a little bit last time with Power of the Daleks. Yeah, we did.
However, the story itself is very clever because it's one of these... We talked about it last time about the fact that you have 2 stories in one. Yeah. This is the first proper example of it I can understand that they tried. But they do a very clever thing in this, and it's a parallel universe part of the story. Sort of alternate history, parallel universe sort of fiction is one of my favourite realms of fiction. And it's brilliant because obviously Inferno was originally written as a 4-parter, and it would be a bit of an anticlimax. You know the world's not going to end, but we need to stretch this out to a 7-parter. So they obviously introduced this whole idea of being transferred to a fictional fascist Britain. And it's fantastic. It doesn't drop in the middle at all, Inferno. It stays constant all the way through. It is absolutely brilliant. It's one of the best written stories, and it's nice to see. And it must have been fun for the actors as well. They kind of, as it mentioned in the synopsis, the kind of evil alter egos of them. Well, not all of them evil. I mean, some of them turned out good in the end. But if you've not seen it, I won't spoil it. Obviously the Brigade Leader, played fantastically by Miss Courtney. Absolutely brilliant. It's so nice. That must have been so much fun to actually do. Again, like talking about I know some of the special effects can be let down, but on certain things, the Primords, I can understand like the kind of people's what's the word I'm looking for, criticism of it, but I never bothered me. The sets are absolutely brilliant. The location is brilliant. The plot is brilliant. The characters are well written. They're more than just
one-dimensional characters. There's so many layers, and there's this sort of budding romance between Sutton and Petra Williams, which is great. I mean, and it's explored in both universes as well.
And we'll get into that a little bit later on in the plot.
But it is really, I honestly cannot praise this story enough. I really can't.
But it's very Quatermass.
Yes, it is.
It's got a lot of elements of Quatermass in it.
Well, when obviously when John Pertwee took over the role, and obviously because they're now trapped on Earth, I think that was one of the kind of inspirations for a lot of the stories, that he's obviously not going to be travelling, so everything has to come to him. And the whole basis of Quatermass was a scientific troubleshooter who would go into these sort of situations and kind of sort them out. And they've obviously done that here with the first season of John Pertwee's first season, and I think it worked really, really well. I think it really did. I mean, without that, we wouldn't have really have got the kind of unit would never have become such an established part of Doctor Who canon. We wouldn't have really the Brigadier, Sergeant Benton, Joe Grant. These characters would not have become so important in terms of Whodom if we didn't actually have that exile to Earth scenario.
Yeah, absolutely. Going into scenarios and characters, you touched on it a little bit there. We'll go through all the main cast and characters as normal. So we start off as always with the Doctor himself, John Pertwee. Before you interject there, because you've got a lot to say about this. So,
Aye.
I really am going to be the interviewer here, just controlling the conversation a little bit. But in regards to the Doctor himself, this is the Pertwee I like, if I'm honest with you. I don't mind some of the elements of Pertwee's Doctor after this, but this is the Pertwee I like. This kind of sardonic wit, but still an intelligent man. It is very much akin to the earlier Doctors in the way his portrayal is. The kind of flamboyance and the dandiness isn't really there in full flow yet. This is the first instance, I think, of Venusian Aikido in the series.
I think it is, yeah.
Yeah. But Pertwee plays it well, and he plays it straight, and you can see why he went for the straight role, because it allows him to mellow and become more the avuncular uncle that he becomes later on. He certainly found his feet by this point. There's a lot of acid wit he has there.
Yes,
You, sir, are a nitwit.
Yes,
was
you,
one
sir,
of the phrases.
are a nitwit.
That was at Stallman, and he said it again in the parallel universe as well.
Pompous, self-opinionated military idiot with the Brigadier
Leopard Stewart at the end. But then we've got Liz Shaw, Caroline John.
Her last story as
Her
well.
last story, yeah absolutely. I almost forgot. What's your thinking of Pertwee? Sorry, I'm going into this.
No, you hit the nail right on the head there with John Pertwee's portrayal in this story. It's actually there's not really much I can add to it from what you've just said. We seem to be in sync with that. Nothing really I can add to it.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's rare. See the power of the Daleks want to see that, but there we are. But yeah,
you're privileged.
You're privileged to have this agreed. Yes, absolutely. Liz Shaw, played by Caroline John. Now, I mentioned this to you when we were watching it earlier on. I think Caroline John's character of Liz Shaw is actually maybe about 5-6 years too early for a companion. It's a great experiment, and I think it laid the foundations for Romana later on, because there's a lot of elements that are very scientific and elements in there that come out in Walla Ward's version of Romana particularly.
They're more on an equal footing, rather with other companions. I mean, with the way the companion is written, they're always the companion is seen as our doorway. They're almost like the audience's representative in those scenes. So I mean, so we constantly have to ask, "What's happening, Doctor?" or "What's happening?" With Liz Shaw, we don't really get that because she knows exactly what's going on. So I can understand why. I don't get me wrong, I love Liz Shaw. She's one of my favourite companions. But I can understand why they thought, actually, this maybe isn't working. We may have to either rewrite the character or bring in someone new. So they decided to bring in someone new, which suited Caroline John down to the ground because she found out she was 4 months pregnant when she was filming, so she couldn't have done it anyway. But there is certainly elements of a prototype Romana. Yeah. Maybe not with the aloofness of Romana, but definitely with the knowledge and the scientific capability is definitely up there with the Doctor. I can understand that where those elements kind of fit in. I
mean, she's not the first intelligent female companion.
Oh no. We had Zoe.
Barbara is actually
Barbara,
the
Susan
first one.
as well.
Susan as well. But they have always been paired as a Pauline
Uh-huh.
kind of characters, although Barbara's maybe not so much as Susan. Please don't get me started with Susan. Oh, Jesus. Sorry, she is not one of my favourite companions, if you probably noticed with the Aztecs. I'm name-dropping a lot in my reviews here. I mean, there's certainly characteristics there, but there is an intelligence companion there, but she's not really paired as a Pauline. She's really independent and works off the Doctor, and the Doctor gives her little code words to do stuff in the hut. And she knows exactly
what to do.
She's not asking questions or anything. It's it's kind of like it's a relationship you're probably more likely to see in the new series with some of the companions than you would see in the old series. It's quite refreshing in that respect.
See, I mean, obviously with the scene where the console first disappears, and she knows exactly what to do. To turn, she has to switch off the power. With many companions, we look at that and go, I don't know what to do. I don't know what button to press. I don't know what lever to pull.
Yeah, the other companions ran off and found somebody of intelligence to do it.
She knows exactly what to do.
Yeah,
that's what I mean. She certainly softens the because when Liz Shaw first appears, she is quite austere. But obviously throughout the story, she definitely softens. But it's. Yeah, it's yeah. yeah.
The only element I would say is, I don't know why, but people are not great fans of Liz Shaw. I can understand maybe from the point of view you were saying why she's not, but she lays the foundation for the most popular companion ever, which is Sarah Jane Smith. If it wasn't for Liz, I don't think you'd have Sarah, Leela, Romana as quickly as you would.
I think you're quite right.
Yeah.
I think you're quite right on that. She was definitely... she wasn't a screamer, and a bit of a pathfinder in that field. I think there's definitely elements of Liz and Sarah Jane, and definitely in Romana, and Martha Jones as well, all the way down the line.
Yep. But we've got the main supporting cast. So we have Olaf Pooley as Stallman, Professor Stallman.
Professor Stallman.
Now, I actually preferred his main universe character over the
sort of fascist Britain parallel universe. We spoke about this earlier, and there's certain elements. He's still driven and he's still arrogant and pompous, and will stop at nothing to secure the success of his project. But there's certain elements there's certain slight cracks in his armour that show the kind of like the humanity underneath, like the moment where Petra has given orders against his wishes, and he says, "Even you, Petra," and there's a kind of moment you think he's really hurt by this. He's really, really hurt. But the only person he thought that he could rely on has finally turned against him, which I don't particularly blame her, to be honest, because he's an absolute... I'm not going to swear.
I'll point you if he does, don't worry.
But the difference was with the alternate Stallman, when he is transforming into a Primord, he actively wants to turn other people into Primords, like he's dragging people's body and putting their face in
sticking their faces in the
rubbing,
ooze, literally rubbing him in it. Yeah.
But we noticed that in the final episode, episode 7, when the Doctor returns to our world, he knows something's going on. He knows he's changing, and he says to the other scientists at the drill head, "Everybody out! I want everybody out. I will deal with this myself." And then he closes the blast doors. And there's a kind of thought that it was an afterthought of thinking that I think he's trying to protect these other scientists to stop them from turning into him.
Yeah,
he knows that whatever's happening, he can't stop it. So instead of actively trying to convert other people to become Primords, he's getting rid of them so he can stop them from coming into Primords. And I thought that was quite a moment that maybe just at the very, very end, before he turned, that there was this kind of almost heroic act that I think, but maybe in many critiques of the story has been kind of overlooked, that at the very, very end he did his best to actually stop people.
There was a good man underneath all that pompousness.
There was a good man underneath under them all. Under all that, sorry.
Yeah. Speaking of Petra, Petra Williams, played by Sheila Dunn, who happened to be the wife of the director Douglas Canfield.
That's right.
She plays more of a, I don't know how we can put this. I mean, she's an intelligent scientist as well in the female reign, and there's obviously a steeliness there, but there's obviously a softness underneath her, and we see that in both the parallel and the normal version. But she plays it pretty solidly, I think. I think she does play it pretty well.
She's absolutely outstanding.
But she's certainly in a mould of Liz Shaw and the way she works and the way she thinks of things. You know, she's not just a glorified secretary. She actually knows what she's doing.
Yeah.
You know,
she's a scientist.
she is a scientist. Although it's portrayed initially that she is just a glorified secretary, but you actually find out very quickly that she's not.
That's what like Sutton says. You can help me type up a few letters, and she brings them down. Say, I'm not his secretary. I'm the executive assistant on this project. So go get somebody else to type your letters.
Yeah, absolutely, and she does that quite well. But I think it's well performed in that respect.
Oh, definitely.
I mean, I don't really have too much of an opinion apart from that. I'm afraid it's not as in depth as Stout as anybody else.
I know.
But speaking of other characters, we'll go back to some of the other supporting cast in a minute. But we'll go back to one of the main regulars, Mr. Courtney.
Oh yes,
Brigadier and Brigade Leader, Lethbridge Stewart. Am I imagining things, or is the relationship between the Doctor and the Brigadier becoming the warm relationship they had later on?
Yeah.
Because the first few stories of the 7th season, there is still that kind of difference between them. There is a friendship there, but the Brigadier is very much you're a colleague, you're not a friend. There's a couple of elements in here where you can see there actually is a friendship there, because there's a moment when the Brigadier is putting up his office in the very first episode, and the Doctor comes in and sees one of these school tie photographs, and he's trying to when he was in passing out school or whatever, and there's a photograph of all of them sitting there,
Sandhurst or somewhere like that.
Sandhurst or somewhere like that, and the Doctor basically takes the piss out of him. Now, a couple of stories before, Lethbridge Stewart probably would have told him off for that.
Yeah, exactly.
But this is a small smile on his face. It's like, all right, you have your fun. I'll get back to you later. I'll get you back later. And it shows again at the end of the story when the Doctor has his rant as he disappears with the TARDIS and ends up in the junk heap 100 yards away, and he comes back and asks, he's trying to phone with the Brigadier afterwards. The Brigadier stands there. You just took the piss out of me. What are you doing? But
let's not bear grudges.
Yeah, exactly. And I think he plays it very well as the normal Brigadier, but he excels himself.
Oh, definitely.
As Brigade Leader.
This is probably one of the, if you like the Brigadier, this is probably one of the best stories to watch. I mean, he definitely rivals John Pertwee in terms of
screen presence
in this story, definitely. I mean, because obviously you've got the good Brigadier, but you've got Brigade Leader, and he's brilliant. This fascist braggart, and it must be a lot of fun to play. It must be an awful lot of fun to play the villain for once, and the eye patch as well.
So we talked about the Brigadier, and we'll go into the other unit member, who's coming into his own here, Benton.
Yes, Sergeant Benton.
So, what's it, Brigade Underleader?
Platoon Underleader.
Platoon Underleader in the alternative, but obviously we know him as Sergeant Benton. This is the first time that Benton's allowed to flourish.
Yeah, definitely. He's kind of more of a kind of supporting role, almost a background character with previous stories, but he definitely comes into his own in this, definitely. Yeah.
And of course, John Levine's in his element being a primoid.
Oh, definitely.
As well. It's obvious he enjoyed that when he did it.
And he's absolutely brilliant. He plays it so naturally, plays it so well. And well, it's essentially 3 roles that he's doing here. He's playing Sergeant Benton, Platoon Underleader Benton, and Primord Benton. And he plays them all fabulously.
He does play well.
Really well.
He's a great addition. You can see why Benton became a fan favourite later on. Because the way he just plays it is quite soft. And there's a scene in there where Benton's trying to get Scarman to come in our world, and he's slightly timid about it. And Brigadier has to actually get him to physically use force to drag Scarman in.
Yeah,
and that softness never goes away.
No,
there's always that kind of softness there with Benton. But you can tell, obviously, there's another element with the parallel one. With the platoon leader when he's shouting, when he's doing the drill with the soldiers outside.
I mean, it's the opposite end of it. He's obviously more colder, more harsh. He's still drilling his men, even though the world is ending around them. Yeah. So, but yeah, he plays them. I think he plays them very well, and I think it's good that we get to see more of Benton, because I mean, as you said, he is a fan. He is a fan favourite.
He is a fan favourite. We'll quickly move on to the others, as we're realising we've got a bit of time here. Greg Sutton, played by Derrick Newark.
Nice, I like him. Nice contrast to
Nice
Stallman.
contrast. I mean, the character's the same in both worlds. I think he's just a bit more abrasive in the parallel one, because obviously the nature of that world. But he's not really any different in either, to be fair.
Well, I think, I mean, it's the only difference to the character that in our world, he's asked to come and join the project by Sir Keith Gold, but obviously in the parallel world, he's essentially drafted. He's there against his will. He has no choice. A kind of very tough character, definitely full of machismo, but very soft and very gentle and quite funny as well. And it's nice to see that obviously that he and the Doctor get on well, and they kind of laugh at each other's jokes at certain points through the story. And even when he goes to the parallel world, that relationship still continues, even though it's a different Sutton. Yeah. And I really, really like his character. And it's nice that he and Petra, you know, our world, not the parallel world, they end up being, well, you know, the lava. They end up together, which is always very sweet in the end. So
it is very sweet, and this is my turn to say I completely agree with you.
No,
we'll move on.
Yay!
We did this for the Doctor.
We've reached details.
Yes, we have. Yes, and then the final one. I've left the best till last. I think Christopher Benjamin as Keith Gold.
Oh yeah.
So Keith Gold, the civil servant you want to see in every Doctor Who story of that era, and he's just brilliant.
He's so nice. He's so he's almost like you're the perfect boss. You know,
he's a human.
Which
is something you don't see much in the ones where the civil servants come in Pertwee era. He's a human being.
I mean, I think of stuff like
Claws of Axos is the best example.
Sea Devils and stuff like that. You know, they're just these kind
pompous civil servants.
Pompous little Englanders, you know, and it's but he's really nice, and he's concerned. He's concerned he's concerned about the safety of the project, but he's also concerned about the people who are working on that project as well. And he's really, really nice. It was quite sad not to see him in the parallel world, because you kind of think, was he a good guy in that, or was he a right?
It's inferred he's a similar, but I get the impression he's a bit more of a, you know, sadist a little bit.
Yeah, well, I mean that's the nature of evil parallel universes.
Exactly,
you know,
exactly.
So.
There's always that ulterior motive, although it's out of fear, which is one thing we didn't mention about the Brigade Leader very quickly. You know, he's scared.
Oh yes, I mean you would be in that situation.
Yeah,
but where it's the nature of a coward. When the cookie crumbles, so do they.
Yeah,
and at the very end, I mean they band together to make sure that the Doctor can get back to our world in order to save it. The Brigade Leader completely crumbles because he's a complete coward. They have accepted their fate. They know that they're going to die. He hasn't. He will do anything. He will kill the Doctor. He will do anything to make sure he can survive, because at the end of the day, he is a coward.
Absolutely.
All braggarts and bullies at the end of the day. It's the foundation of their entire personality is they are cowards.
We'll move on to the production now, production elements of it, and we'll get on to the direction of here. Now, little backstory here. The director that's credited is Douglas Camfield, who lasted the invasion, Patrick Troughton story. And he's the one that introduced Unit, so it's quite fitting he's back again to do another story. Now, of what I understand, he did some of the studio stuff early on, and all the filming outside, but then he fell ill.
Yeah, he did.
And Barry Letts covered the studio stuff, and you don't really see a join.
No, you don't.
You don't. I think.
Not at all.
But the only reason I believe it works is because Barry Letts directed Enemy of the World.
Yeah, that's right.
And that was a very action orientated one as well. And the way it worked, the way the setup is in there, the direction style is very similar. So I think that's probably why it fits in okay. Barry Letts had to come in and finish it. Obviously, he produced it this time, but he's director at heart, which is why they had all the agreements where he would direct an episode or story every year.
Yeah, that's right.
As part of keeping him as producer.
Yeah, spot on.
But production here is very well polished. I mean, we've got some amazing stunts in here as well, including the what was, you told me earlier on, it was the world record fall from the top of the building at the time. Yeah,
it's like there's a sort of tower, and I think it was well over 9 stories, and that time it was the Guinness World Record for a stunt fall off a building. I think it's obviously been broken. I think now.
It's been broken a few times.
But it's at the time, and I mean, I thought that the action sequences were really good. I mean, some of it looked pretty precarious as well. I mean, because they were shooting on top of
silos.
These silos. I mean, it did look dangerous. It
And
looked...
you've got these little gantries in between them, and they're walking about quite happily, you know.
Having to take a camera up there must have been quite frightening. I mean, especially in those kind of narrow wee gantries. It must
And a
have been...
60mm camera isn't a small thing. It's quite
it's quite chunky. But I thought that the action sequences were absolutely spot on. I thought they were first class.
Yeah. Production-wise, obviously you've got the Primoids. We've mentioned them already, but that's an interesting concept. That, you know, turning in, you know, they thrive on heat. And there's a couple of elements. There's a bit in the nuclear control room where you've got the Primoid that's run amok, is trying to affect the nuclear power supply, and this burnt outline on the wall.
It's got a scorch mark. Yeah, that's really good.
It's really quite cool. Yeah, and the way they worked it. So some of the production values are really good. I mean, there's elements there you can see. Obviously, I mean, the most comical and I mean, Doctor Who has to tease the elements anyway. But obviously, if it works, it works. But you've got to suspend a bit of disbelief. The only bit I don't like is the sequence with the Doctors between universes, and he's doing he's got his gurning.
Yeah.
Pertwee can't do. Pertwee can't really do distress on his face. It looks like he's just gurning in a comedy way.
Yeah.
And the mirror shots and things like that. But apart from that, the rest of it stands up quite well. Sound-wise, it stands up well because there's lots of background noise. I was saying earlier on there isn't any music, but effectively there is. But it's background noise. It's the continuous drilling in the background that seems to get more and more intense as time goes on. The story goes on, which helps build up the
sense of tension.
So
I mean, the only real kind of use of music is obviously the theme music in the opening and closing credits, and there's kind of moments where you see Stallman, you know, he's starting to change, and there's the kind of, it was written by Delia Derbyshire, and I've forgotten the piece of the music. I think it was called Blue Veil and Golden Sands. I think that's the only point in the whole story where music is used to that effect. It's all about sound. It's all the sound itself sets the scene. I think that's one of the reasons why it's one of the favourite stories. It just seems to be the use of sound in it is just absolutely incredible. It's so well done.
Yeah, and it's one of these. It's rarity to have lack of sound at that time because music's starting to become a bit more influential when it comes to keeping the plot along. Because obviously the '60s stuff has a lot of non-musical elements, but the early '70s stuff is starting when you see a lot more music coming in.
It's like when you see if you watch Terror of the Autons, which is the next story, it's very music heavy. I mean, it's obviously it's Dudley Simpson, and the music's great, but it's very music heavy, and it's all synthesizers, and it's a very nice contrast going from bare minimal music or minimalist music, I should say, to being quite music heavy, and I think that's one of the reasons why Inferno stands out. Apart from that, it's a cracking story, and I will say that ad nauseum. It is an absolutely brilliant story. The acting is first class, the writing is first class, the sets, the location, everything is absolutely brilliant. I cannot recommend this story enough. I really, really can.
You've watched it a lot. It's like it's your Happiness Patrol.
Oh, definitely.
Happiness Patrol is one of my favourite stories, and you can tell that from the review. Another link click, I know. But you can tell that from the review that I do with the Happiness Patrol. I was watching it earlier on just to get a feel of the sort of reviews, because you were talking about this being your favourite story, so I want to see how I was coming across. And I go really in depth with it like you have here. So you can tell when people really love a story, and this is definitely one of yours.
Oh, definitely.
Absolutely.
If it's difficult for me to choose a favourite story, because I have different favourites. I have different favourites for different reasons, but this one's definitely in my top 3. Definitely Inferno.
Well, speaking of top 3 and scoring, it's that time.
Okay.
I'm interested to see how many TARDISes out of 5 you're going to give this.
And 5's the maximum I can give.
5's the maximum.
I can't give any more.
No.
5.
I thought you might say that.
Out of doubt.
I mean, this is his favourite story. I understand completely where you're coming from, but it is in the echelons of Happiness Patrol material for me. So 4.5 out of 5.
Oh, well, thanks.
4.5 out of 5.
That's
so
grand.
There we are. We approve on that. Again, half a TARDIS difference, but then again,
what's half a TARDIS between friends?
No, well, quite a lot of what I'm understanding, but
well, I wasn't going to mention that.
So this month, my review is going to be on The Empty Child, The Doctor Dances, which is the 9th and 10th episodes of Series 1 of Doctor Who, the return series, the renewed series, back in 2005, starring Christopher Eccleston as the Doctor, Rose Tyler is played by Billie Piper, and John Barrowman plays Captain Jack Harkness. This story is set in the 40s, and I have here a synopsis on my screen. I don't have it in the television companion because the television companion was only made for stories up to the TV movie in 1996. Go figure, it was printed in 1998, 7 years before this story came out. But I have a synopsis here, and I'm going to read through it, and then you guys can hear my thoughts. Here we go. Chasing a metallic object through the time vortex, the Ninth Doctor and his companion Rose Tyler arrive in London during the Blitz. While Rose meets Captain Jack Harkness, the dashing time agent responsible for bringing the object, the Doctor finds a group of homeless children terrorised by Jamie, an empty child wearing a gas mask, who is constantly questioning everybody, "Are you my mummy?" Nancy, who has taken on the role of looking after the children, is especially scared by the empty child. The child's plague is spreading through wartime London, and its zombie army is on the march. The Ninth Doctor and Rose form an alliance with intergalactic con man Jack, but find themselves trapped in the abandoned hospital. They head to the crash site of Jack's supposed space junk and discover that the ground zero for the mysterious plague. They find the cause is a virus from nanogenes, subatomic robots who have the power to heal injuries, and after finding Jamie seriously injured, they put him back together into the empty child that's been terrorising everyone. The Doctor recognises this after Nancy confirms she is Jamie's mummy. The nanogenes recognise the genetic code and heals Jamie back to life. The Doctor then patches an upgrade to the nanogenes to cure everyone else affected, triumphantly stating,
"Everybody lives, Rose. Just this once. Everybody lives!"
Now, this is the very first script that Stephen Moffat wrote for the series, and it uses some of the tropes that Stephen Moffat's become known for in his stories. There is a Deus Ex Machina in here, the nanogenes, little robots, so machinery does come and save the day, but it's done in such a heartfelt and such a well done way that you don't really notice it at all. Characterization, I can't say this tonight, characterization. We've got the Doctor, the Ninth Doctor. Christopher Eccleston is at the height of his powers here. He's brilliant as a Doctor throughout, very inquisitive, but also very concerned. He doesn't take quite a liking to Jack. He sees him as a con man and is not very pleased with him. Rose thinks that the Doctor needs to use a bit more tech. Jack comes along and does exactly that. The Rose kind of warms him initially, then finds out obviously his motives, and then says, maybe you're not all you're cracked up to be. But she is good here as well. Billie Piper's starting to warm to the role very well. I do like the performance here. It's not too over the top. It's not too chavvy. It's just right for the period. And she doesn't really get much screen time with Nancy. But when she does pair off, the chemistry is good between them. Oh, pardon me. And then we've got Captain Jack himself by John Barrowman. Now, the character's a little grating, a little smarmy and a little full of himself, but that makes the charm of the character when you see that he's made a mistake, and he does feel guilty about it and wants to try and make amends, and obviously he ends up saving the day by stopping the bomb that was going to fall on the Tula warship, or Tula ambulance rather, and stop it from being destroyed. So he actually takes the bomb on board his hidden cloaked ship, which was hiding around Big Ben, and ends up going to be self-sacrificed, but the Doctor and Rose save him. The guest cast is fairly minimal. Richard Wilson does a very good turn as Dr. Constantine. He's very enjoyable, very staid, and works the part well. And then you've got Florence Hough, who's the main guest cast member of Nancy. Now, she plays a brilliant role here as the young mother who plays an older child, older teenager, looking after these homeless kids. And the fact that the child itself is her son chasing her all over the place is really creepy. Atmosphere. It's all shot at night. It works brilliantly. Obviously, with the filming around Cardiff, at various places, and around South Wales, at Barry Island for the train line, the abandoned railway station. and the hospital is Cardiff Royal Infirmary. So, you know, there's the various places around Cardiff they use, but they use to great effect because it's all in the dark, it's all mysterious, it's all spooky. The filming James Horse does when it comes to Jamie and the view from the child, that distorted warped view they have from the child is really cool. When you see it the other way and the child's coming towards them at one point, you see there's nothing behind it. That's a very great effect and very worthwhile. It still stands up now, 12 years later. The telekinesis bit, yeah, I understand where that's come from, and it was creepy for the phone scene at the police box, and it's also creepy for the radio and all the electric equipment that turns on that hears the child when it says "Mommy, Mommy, Mommy." That's very creepy, and that's the start of Stephen Moffat's trope of making things scary. And it was the first big scary hit for Doctor Who of the new series. And obviously Stephen Moffat's gone on to create many more scary monsters of various ilks, but that is one of the better ones. The acting between the actors is good. I mean, John Barrowman is great as Captain Jack and plays the part well. As I say, Billie Piper looks okay for what she's doing. She serves well enough in here. It's not the best of Spunky Rose, but it is, you know, you can see why Rose is a likeable character. She's really toned down. She's not the very selfish person here. She really wants to care. As I say, I love the Doctor's characterization, but the way she plays off with Nancy. There's a scene when they've just checked out the in-space ship at where it's been guarded, and the Doctor then starts talking about his admiration of how the Brits stood up to Hitler in the Second World War, and that's a brilliant scene. I love that scene. It's a really touching scene, and it's really good to enjoy. I hadn't seen it in about 4 years, I think, until I reviewed it for this episode. And it rushes along at a good pace. You don't realise how quickly the story rushes along. But I did enjoy the pace of it. It works just as well. I love the bit at the end where the Doctor manages to get everybody to live again. But as you say, that seems to be a Stephen Moffat trope that comes a bit more often in the future. But obviously you'll see that in later reviews. And I do think that it stands up even 12 years later with the effects and the way it's done and the way it's filmed. And it's certainly classed and certainly well deserved as a classic of the recent revived series, and certainly tops polls or goes to the top of polls or close to the top of polls and is a favourite story of people across the whole Who fandom. And it's deservedly so. It really is quite an enjoyable story. Overall, I give this story 4 TARDISes out of 5. It's not quite 4.5. It could have, but I decided 4 out of 5 is probably worth it for this. And I would recommend watching it if you get the chance. Now, as always, with a classic series review, I have with me the television companion, and I'm going to read the synopsis to the story that's contained within it. On the planet Carfel, a high-ranking official, Malin Tekka, uses threats against Perry to force the Doctor to go to Earth and bring back a young woman called Vina, who, while holding a precious amulet, has accidentally fallen into the Time Lash, a time tunnel through which the planet's tyrannical ruler, the Borad, banishes all rebels. The Doctor also inadvertently brings back Herbert, a man from the 19th century, who stows away aboard the TARDIS. The Borad was once a Carphalon scientist, but accidentally sprayed himself with an unstable compound called Muscatosine 80, while experimenting on a Morlox, a savage underground reptilian creature, and consequently became half Carphalon, half Morlox. The Borad plans to bring about the deaths of all the Carphalons by provoking a war with their neighbours, the Bandrils, and repopulate the planet with creatures such as himself, starting with Perry. The Doctor uses a Chronoton time crystal to defeat a clone of the Borad and makes peace with the Bandrils. He then defeats the real Borad by banishing him through the Time Lash to 12th century Scotland. I've done nearly 30 reviews, and all of them have kind of gone in the region of 3 to 4.5 TARDISes out of 5. And Time Lash is slated for being not the best Doctor Who story ever. Not one of the best anyway. And I was thinking to maybe even up a little bit and have a look at it and look at the story and see if it actually is as bad as everybody makes out. I mean, I've seen the story multiple times, but this is the first time I've had a more critical eye over it than just watching it in a take my brain out capacity. And if I'm absolutely honest, it's not too bad. Whether it justifies having the ratings and the rating I want to give it, that's down to what you guys think. But overall, the idea is pretty sound. It's very basic. The first part's actually pretty good. The second part falls apart a little bit. A nice plot lines, a nice way it works, but it does fall apart a little bit. And it definitely has been written with 25 minutes in mind per episode than 45 minutes per mind, because there's definitely beats throughout the story which could quite easily split it into a 4-parter than the 2-parter 45 minutes we have here. Production values aren't the best either. You can tell it's a cheap one. I mean, the sets aren't too bad, but there's elements where things break or they don't quite work. There's the power room early in the story where the old Malin, can't remember his name now, what's his name again? Mikros. The old Malin Mikros goes in the power room and he's moving that controller. I'll be that way. Moving that controller. No, I was right, but that way. Moving that controller along and he breaks it. It comes off in his hand and he has to place it really quickly through the scene. There's the time tunnel itself and the tinsel that's in it, and put it this way, they're doing well with what they've got, but this is the sort of thing they would do in the 60s, not the 80s. It looks a bit cheap and cheerful. I mean, they've done the best of what they can, but you can tell it's a cheap budget one. You can tell it's the one with the budget's really cheap. And actually, if you look very closely, you can tell where they inserted the extra scenes in the TARDIS, the bickering side, because there's more of the TARDIS, the bits with Herbert and the Doctor alone in the TARDIS, and the bits with Perry and the Doctor near the beginning. But there's a bit there where Colin Baker's hair is a bit more straggly than the rest of the scenes, so you can tell it's a little bit later, and it's filmed at a later time, which it was. It was filmed during the filming for Revelation of the Daleks. So it's not ideal in that respect. And yes, I'll get to the characters and the characterizations in a moment, because they're the bits that really make or break it. I just want to get the production bits out of the way, because they did well with what they've got, but it looks tired, it looks cheap, it looks like they've run out of ideas, more like they've run out of money than anything else. They've tried to be imaginative with it, but there's elements you can think, no, that's cheap. You've then got there's other bits that are brilliant, and I'll come to like the Borad's makeup is fantastic design, considering how limited their budget probably must have been. It's pretty good. I think it's quite a good little piece of makeup that's been done there. Most of the costumes are basically boiler suits, loosened up a little bit. Not flattering to anybody. The only one who's got really a costume as such, apart from the Doctor and Perry, is Vina, with that highbrow dress that she's got, that purple dress she's got, and of course Herbert with his Victorian garb, late Victorian garb. But overall, yeah, I can see why people would detract from it in the long run in regards to the production values. It is cheap. It's not the best example of mid to late 80s Who in regards to production values. There's other better versions either side of it, never mind. The direction's plodding, I think it's the right way. Benton Roberts is okay, and there's times where his direction is pretty good, but this one's pretty standard and safe, and you don't really get many arty shots or anything like that. It is pretty much working to the full camera setup, and it is competent. It does well. I'll come to the music later. Let's go through some of the characters, the music and the writing later. Let's go to some of the characters. So you got the Doctor by Colin Baker, played by Colin Baker, of course, that gentleman up there. To be fair, Colin seems settled in the role at this point. Apparently there was a production thing where he was taken away for rehearsals for pantomime at some point during the rehearsals, and you can tell at some points the performance isn't quite as refined as it has been. But he seems to have found his niche there, and there is that acidness that the Sixth Doctor has, but there's also that kind of warmth that Carey has of Perry. And I actually quite like the interplay that Colin Baker has with Paul Darrow's character Tekka, and the way they work together. And it's nice to see a role reversal as such, and I'll explain that a little bit more later on. Overall, the Doctor's okay. He's tolerable. There's occasional flashes of arrogance there, but it's not overstated. It's starting to mellow down a little bit now, which I'm quite liking. And it's certainly the side of Colin Baker's Doctor I do like. This kind of acid portrayal he has in the very early part of his first season, and the Twin Dilemma it can be jarring at times. Then you've got Nicola Bryant playing Perry, who basically becomes Perils of Pauline for this story. Perry's quite a strong character in all the other stories, and does get a bit to do. You get a little element of her botany interest, but overall, she's there getting stuck, locked up, tortured, scared by the big Morlock's head. There's a few rude comments about what that looks like, which I'm not going to go into in this review. And it's not the best before. She does a good job what she's got, but to be fair, Nicola Bryant's had better material, and she has better material either side of this. This is not Gold Perry. This is not Gold Perry at all. Then you've got Paul Darrow, who chews the set with his role as Tekka. Even from this first scene, he's chewing the set. The evilness side, he plays well. But when he's speaking to the Doctor, he kind of overacts. He's like a bad Shakespearean actor, the way he overreacts. And actually, as I say, it's roles reversed, because when Colin Baker was in Blake 7 playing Babe and the Butcher a few years before, he went over the top. So Paul Darrow's kind of returned the favour a little bit. He's enjoyable to watch, and I can understand why people don't like his portrayal. He's a bit OTT at times, he is, but he's not the worst of the guest cast. By a far, he is not the worst of the guest cast. One of the best of the guest cast is the Borad, played by Robert Ashby. Very understated. This character doesn't shout or scream. It's very low and calm voice, and it makes him very menacing. As I say, the makeup's good for the actor, and Robert Ashby plays it very well, and very scheming. There's a couple of scripting issues with the Borad, which I'll come to in a minute, but I don't, it's a good villain. He is a good villain, very scheming, very plotting, very quiet, and the best villains tend to be the quieter ones for most of the time. I know Davros is probably an exception, but when Davros rants, he rants, and it takes him away. But when he's in the scheming stage, those sort of characters work better as enemies than the ones that rant, rave, and scream all the time in Doctor Who. Then you've got other guest cast. You've got Mick Cross, Eric Deacon. It was Rennis who was the old male and not Mick Cross. Sorry, got that wrong. So you got Mick Cross, played by Eric Deacon. Decent performance. He's kind of like the action man of the piece of the planet of Carfil. He's okay. He's solid enough. Unfortunately, Jean-Anne Crowley's performance of Vina is off. And I'm trying to think why she seems so wooden. And it's eye contact. She has a lack of eye contact with all the characters she speaks to. Even when she's trying to have one-to-one with people, she'll start a sentence speaking away from the person she's speaking to, stare in the distance, and then look at them. It just is stilted. It doesn't work. It's slow. It just doesn't seem like a proper acting performance, and it just doesn't work. And there's something about it that doesn't work, and you kind of want her to be thrown the time lash and never come back again. And it's one of those characters. You've then got Neil Hallett, who plays Rennis, the old Malin. He plays it like a character who's well weary but wants to plot and doesn't have the guts to plot, which is where Micros comes in. He plays it suitable enough. You've got Kendron, played by David Ashton. Oh, he falls into the character of what Vina does, that sort of thing, where the acting, he's the other side though, he's a whiny, annoying acting, and he just seems too panicky all the time, and it just doesn't work. It's a horrible character. Then you've got one of the better characters, Herbert, played by David Chandler. Now Herbert is of course supposed to be, a spoiler, H.G. Wells in his younger days. And David Chandler plays it with wonder and a determination and a pluckiness, which is really endearing and does lift the story. The fact that Herbert is effectively the companion Perry is not in this story. Inquisitive, questioning, wants to dive in there and help as best they can, and is basically the companion that Perry should have been in this story. And I think that's probably a fair assessment. David Chandler plays it brilliantly. I think he's got... I love the character, and it's a very nice character, and you do like every scene he's in. The bits in the TARDIS with him and the Doctor, when they're going to use the TARDIS as a shield to blow up the Bandrel's missile, is very well played between the two of them. Herbert works very well there with the conversation they're having with the Doctor, and you can see why the Doctor would get a little bit annoyed with that abrasive personality. It does work quite well, and yeah, he's certainly one of the better actors here. You've got other characters. You've got Brunner, who doesn't really do much. Played by Peter Robert Scott. He's there for the first half and gets Perry into trouble, and then doesn't seem to be seen again once he gets thrown into Time Lash. That's probably why. You got Saison by Dickon Ashworth. He plays a rebel. He plays it okay. You've got Katz, played by Tracy Louise Ward. She plays it in a way that she feels that she has a love interest with Saison. I'm kind of understanding where that comes from, but the bit where they're fighting, at the beginning of the second episode, and Saison gets hit, Katz's reaction is very caring, and she does a decent job of being the supporting cast there. It's not a bad wee performance there. And you've got other characters that are in there that I'm not going to mention too much, but there's two other characters I will mention. Dennis Carey making his last appearance in Doctor Who as the old man, or the Borad that everybody sees. He's not doing much, but the inflection in Dennis Carey's voice always works in the characters he's played. He does that with the Keeper. He does that with the Keeper and Keeper Traken. He does that with Crotus in Sharda. He's quite good with the intonation he has in his roles. And the standout stilted performance, and I know it's deliberate, is Dean Holmesworth's android. And the bit I don't like about the android is the bit when Brunner notices Perry's gone into the caves, and he comments how pretty she was, and the android turns around and said, "Yes, indeed, she was." Basically, like the 4 bars you get in Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Do 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 do. That's what it sounds like. It's really weird, and it's odd. And that's really some of the cast there and the ups and downs, really. The writer, Glenn McCoy, his first script. You can tell it's his first script. There's plot holes and elements there. The time travel bit is done quite well. I don't know if that's, would fill in the gaps or not. The premise is there. I like the idea of this dictator who has overtaken and caused fear and distress. The Time Lash is an interesting concept, although not realised that well with the tinsel in the background and everything else. But the writing is actually not too bad in most parts. The bits with the Borad are actually probably the best bits of script. the conversation between the Doctor and the Borad in his sanctum is really quite chilling, and is actually quite a good little piece, I suppose is the way it calls it. I'll go back to the direction a little bit here. Yeah, most of it's overlit and staid and clinical, but the bits in the inner sanctum with the Borad are underlit, and they work quite well. They're quite creepy, and they do make it more than just a overlit this will do lighting that goes through most Doctor Who of this time. When you're talking about futuristic settings, they all do it. Even into the McCoy era, they kind of do that as well. But the incidental music by Liz Parker, I think this is the only time she's actually does anything for Doctor Who. And it's mostly incidental. There's not really any themes as such. It's just helping to plod the action along. And I love the dee do dee do do the synth saw. I think it's saw wave or something like that. I love that little bit. The bit near the time lash kind of works when the Doctor's been thrown into the time, or trying to be thrown into the time lash that time. It kind of works there. Overall, it's not jarring. It does complement it a little bit. It's maybe a harsher incidental music than you get with some, and it's more in the region of what you would have with Roger Brearley. Is it Roger Lim and his stuff? It's kind of that harsher sound you get with Roger Lim's stuff. Roger Lim did a brilliant job with Case of Androzani, so it proves that obviously he's got that way of doing it. But yeah, that's the thing with incidental music this era, because it's mostly synth. It can be jarring at times to modern ears a little bit, and this one it doesn't. It kind of does its job and does it well. I don't have much problem with it. Incidentally, when I'm recording this and it will go out, it's actually 35 years since it was originally broadcast, to the week. It was broadcast, which is quite interesting. So that was ironic. It wasn't planned like that. It's just the way it seems to have turned out. And overall, that does make it an interesting proposition to review. Overall, it's okay. It's not the best Doctor Who. I can see why people may not necessarily enjoy it as much. But to be fair, I don't think it's the worst of Doctor Who. It's certainly, you can see it's low budget. You can see it doesn't work like that. Some of the acting is awful, which brings it down. But some of the acting's brilliant. The two leads, one is okay, the other is terrible. That brings it down a little bit. My TARDIS is out of 5. I think I'll have to go halfway here and do 2.5 TARDISes out of 5. Yes, so I'm reviewing The Happiness Patrol, the second broadcast story of season 25, starring the 7th Doctor, Sylvester McCoy, and Ace, played by Sophie Aldred. I have, as always, meet here the television companion. I'm going to read out the synopsis that comes out of the plot in this book. So, here we go. The TARDIS arrives on the planet Terra Alpha, where the Doctor and Ace discover a society in which sadness is against the law. A law enforced with considerable zeal by the brightly uniformed Happiness Patrol. The planet is ruled over by Helen A, with the aid of her companion Joseph C, and her carnivorous pet sticker axe named Fifi. The penalty for those found guilty of unhappiness is death, in a stream of molten candy prepared by Helen A's executioner, the robotic Candyman, and his associate Gilbert M. The time travellers help to foment rebellion amongst the downtrodden population and the subterranean pipe people, the planet's original inhabitants, and Helen A is overthrown. Joseph C and Gilbert M escape in a shuttle, while the Candyman is destroyed and Fifi killed. Helen A finally realises that happiness is nothing without the contrast of sadness. Ah. So, yes, one of my favourite stories of Doctor Who classic series, in fact of all time. And most people, when they watch this story, they think, hang on a minute, it's quite light, it's quite bubbly, the sets are really cheap and, you know, really grating, you know, they don't look good, the set, you know, that sort of thing. But if you think about it, that's the whole point. That is the point of the Happiness Patrol. It's an artificial surrounding that they're setting in. Alright, it's all studio based. It would have been nice to maybe have some exterior stuff for the street scenes, but it is all studio based. But apart from that, the garish colour schemes in Helene's office and the Candyman's candy kitchen are really striking. The colours are very muted and very dark and very despairing and very film noir, with all these shadows and that in the streets. And there's a good couple of scenes that show that in the story as well. But it's deliberate, it's there to give a point, and it's subtly done as a parable of the state of United Kingdom of Great Britain in the late 80s when it was created. Helene is probably a parody of Margaret Thatcher. You've got Joseph C, which is parody of her husband Dennis. You've then got the drones with the protests and the strikes, referring to the miners' strikes earlier in the decade. And then you've got the downtrodden people who feel they've been repressed and oppressed with the policies that are happening. This time with happiness. You know, you've got to be happy, otherwise you die. You've got the Happiness Patrol, these groups of basically terrorists. That's what they are. They're basically big police, the secret police, effectively, at the end of the day, going around making sure everybody's in order, so it's like a police state. And then also you've got the Pipe People, which are like the original inhabitants, the people who are downtrodden and are being, you know, forced underground, and kind of that's a reflection of the unemployment that was going on in the 80s and some of the apathy that was being felt by some members of society at that point. And to be fair, it's done subtly. You don't, you know, everybody can more or less pick out that Helene is a parody of Margaret Thatcher, and you've got Joseph C as Dennis, but then you've got all these other characters round about. You've got the fawning, effectively deputy, which is Daisy Kay, which would reflect of Willie Whitelaw and the cabinet at the time. At the time of this being filmed. And then you've got the Candyman, which is the big monster, and he is the big controversial thing. Definitely with a controversy in regards to his appearance, the way he's been designed. Bassett's, the sweet company that's based in the UK, took a bit of an umbrage to the design because it's very similar to their Bertie Bassett character that they were doing at the time to advertise their licorice all sorts. But whatever the case with that, I've got to say that I do enjoy this story because it's just a nice romp. It's 3 episodes. It's not long. It's maybe a little too short. Maybe it needs a little bit longer for some of the small characters to delve in. But speaking of characters, I'm going to go into the characters a little bit more in a minute. But there's a couple of other things I want to mention here. There's a couple of times in there which I've noticed this past couple of times of watching it, the routine disappearances. Now that's basically people being killed and taken away, you know, so they're disappearing as such. But there is a couple of numbers that come up that are mentioned at one point. Helene mentions at one point in the first episode, routine disappearance
499,987.
And then in the next episode, she turns around and says routine disappearance number
500,005.
There's quite a killing spree going on in one night, if you think about it. And if you think about 500,000 people have disappeared, basically. More than 500,000 people have disappeared through the actions that she's done. And it's quite sadistic. You get smothered by molten candy. That's really quite sadistic, and I've mentioned that on here. But definitely, there's certainly some elements at the beginning, and there's certainly some elements through there which are very film noir-like. There's a lot of shadows, there's a lot of darkness. The camera work is maybe slightly off balance. It's not quite straight, just like this shot here. It's perspective, guys. But yeah, no. In all seriousness, though, there are a good couple of scenes. You've got the very opening scene with the Killjoy that's sitting down on the park bench when Silas P comes along, this undercover thing.
There's a place, a secret place, where some of us go to indulge our depressions, to share our miseries with other Killjoys like you and me.
And obviously he gets his comeuppance latest when he tries it on the Doctor and kind of regrets it, I think that's a polite way of putting it. And then you've got what is probably one of the standout scenes for me in the whole story is the balcony scene. The Doctor is trying to get between one place and another, and the sniper's on the balcony, shooting anybody who moves, basically. And the Doctor manages to talk one of the snipers down because he's pointing at point-blank range at the Doctor, and the Doctor manages to talk the sniper down from killing him.
Why don't you do it then? Look me in the eye, pull the trigger, end my life.
No,
Why not?
I can't.
And that is the first proper, there's an element in each story of season 25 of this darker Doctor that we see in season 26, and this is the element that you see in this story. There is that whimsical Sylvester McCoy-ish. He plays his strengths here in regards to the whimsical side that he plays, but there is a dark plot. There's a plotting there, and you're starting to see, carry on what happened in the previous story that was broadcast, Remembrance of the Daleks. You're starting to see the darker Doctor and his plots and schemes, and he's actually made a point to come here to try and sort things out. It's not like he stumbled in. He's actually made a point, and he makes that clear at the beginning of the episode. So when it comes to the characters, you've got the Doctor, you've got Sylvester McCoy. It looks like he's finding his feet at this point. And one thing to notice of this story, this is actually the last story they recorded of season 25, but it went out second. So it's the last story they recorded. So at this point, Sylvester McCoy knows his character, he knows what he wants to go with it. So with the next season, we know, obviously, the darker, manipulative Doctor is really coming through at that point. So this really shows, obviously, the character and development here. And he goes a little bit later again in the next story, Silver Nemesis. But then again, it is Silver Nemesis, and I won't go into that in this. Sophie Aldred, yeah, you can see she's settled in the role now, and she's loving the character of Ace, and is very, very right, and says, no, that's not right, you can't do that, you can't do this. There is a slightly childish element there as well, but she is still exploring at this point, so I suppose that's probably true. You've then got the guest cast. You've got Sheila Hancock, who's absolutely fantastic. She nearly steals the show in all the scenes that she's in, even with the ones when she's with the Doctor and the other characters, the other Ace. She really plays it brilliantly, and it's a really great interpretation of the character, and she really proves how much of a sycophant and how much she really is in denial that everybody around her has fallen apart. She's in denial. She wants to have her own vision, and she will not stand in anybody. She'll not have anybody standing in her way. That's very clear. And then you got Joseph C, played by Ronald Fraser, who's the very good sidekick husband, who's meek, but he does get his comeuppance at the end, which I think is really nice. You've then got the Happiness Patrol themselves. You've got Daisy Kay, played by Gina Hale, who I know better as Teabag, one of the kids' TV shows that she starred in a couple of years later. Very good performance here, very, very driven. She's a very good lackey, head lackey. She knows what she's doing. She's got that very sadistic bite in there, and I think the voice helps with that. She's got that kind of voice that comes across with that. You've got Rachel Bell playing Priscilla P. Another side of the darkness, she enjoys the sadistic moment of being there. She loves tracking them. She's a fanatic, as she's called at one point. It's a really great character to see there. You then got Susan Q, who is the Happiness Patrol, who's not happy. She's the member who's not happy, played by Leslie Dunlop, who's becoming quite a regular in Doctor Who by this point. Her and another guest star have appeared in Doctor Who in the Fifth Doctor's era. But Leslie Dunlop makes another appearance here as Susan Q, and it's a quiet enough performance. She does it strong enough, and it works for the time. And then you've got the Candyman, played by David John Pope. Now, I love the character Candyman. He loves his work, but he's a great character, and he plays it. David John Pope plays it with aplomb. And considering it's a very bulky character, and it's a character that, oh dear. And it was very, possible that, the character is a bit more, it's hard to see. It's hard to see the character in a light that you can maybe go with here. But the Candyman I do enjoy. I think the character comes across as a great Doctor Who monster, but there is a bit more of a sadistic tone there. And the fact he gets stuck with lemonade, I don't know if that's true or not, and then gets sorted by water. I think that's a bit odd. But the Doctor manages to play him for a fool about, which is great. Then you have Gilbert M, the inventor of the Candyman and basically Candyman's sidekick. And you see that he's got a very dark tone to him as well. And he decides, you know what? I'm not fixing the Candyman again this time round. He's such a pain in the bum. I'm not going to fix him again. And I love that sadistic side. He's saying,
but remember this, Candyman, symbiosis. You need me, and I need me.
You need you.
I need me.
I need you, and you need you.
That's right. And just as you're squeezing the breath out of me, your candy hand tightens round your own throat.
And I think that's quite a cruel thing. And I love the arguments they have there. It's supposed to be happy, and half the characters are arguing all the time. It's quite sadistic in that respect. It must be happy in Hell and Ace sights, If Helena knows you're happy, then you're fine. But if you're not in Helena's sights, you can be a bit more grumpy or angry. I think that's a bit weird. And then you got Trevor Sigma by John Normington, played by John Normington, and he is basically better known for playing what was it? Oh, the character in Graves of Adrazzani. It'll come back to me. It'll be on the bottom here. Case of Adrazzani, and he's playing the Morgus. That's what it is, Morgus. He's playing Morgus in Caves of Adrazzani. He makes his appearance for the last time in Doctor Who here. Different characters, very meek, humble, but you get the feeling that he's playing a kind of meek and humble man. He's playing a consummate civil servant at the end of the day, but he knows what he's doing. He knows what his aim is. And there's a comment made there when the Doctor meets up with him in the end, the third episode at Forum Square, where he basically turns around and said they wanted to know what Helena's killing spree was like because they're a bit concerned about what's happening on this colony. And I think that's quite a cool little line that you may miss sometimes. And then you've got Richard D. Sharp, who plays El Sigma. Nice little character, nice little sidekick for the Doctor, but he doesn't really do much apart from play the harmonica. And even that, I think, has been done off camera as well. I don't think he actually plays the harmonica himself. I think he's actually miming to someone playing off camera, if I remember correctly. But overall, I do enjoy this story. It's one of my favourite stories, and you'll hear this. It's 15 minutes nearly this episode's gone on. I've just gone on and just rolled and rolled and rolled and rolled and rolled. And it's a good sign of an episode when I know it and I love it and I can watch it again and again and again. I really appreciate it. And I love it because it's got all these extra layers. You've got the upfront layer who is going, oh, that's a bit rubbish. And then you've got the layer underneath that, the slightly darker tones, and then you've got the darker tones underneath in regards to the suppression and everything else, and it just works a treat, and I really do enjoy this episode, and I really hope that if you guys haven't seen it yet, you get a chance to see it, because I think it's one of the better stories of McCoy's era. And it's funny because everybody has a split of 6 bad and 6 good, and half the 12 fits in most people's bad. It's actually in my good. I would basically say the whole of season 26, bar Battlefield, and then you've got Greatest Show, Remembrance, and Happiness Patrol. I would say those are my 6. So you've got those. Most people say the whole of season 26. They say Greatest Show and Remembrance, and they leave out the Happiness Patrol as one of the bad ones. No, I disagree. I'm not a great fan of Battlefield, to be fair, but that's something you'll find in a later review, I'm sure. Okay. That is it. That's the end of the reviews for 2017. Thank you very much, guys, for watching. They will be back in 2018, and I have a few plans of maybe having some contributors with me when we're doing the reviews next time round, so that'll be quite fun. Even if it isn't, you'll just see me a piece of camera doing the usual, as always. But if you've enjoyed this, thanks very much for watching. Don't forget to check out the 6 facts on the Happiness Patrol. It's in that corner there. Also, don't forget to check out the rest of the Doctor Who reviews of this series. Next week is Odd Week video, and it's the last of the Kidstructors, and what a lovely Christmas treat you're going to have there. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. As I say, give you your opinion, your memories of the Happiness Patrol, and I almost forgot once again, I did it last video as well, to give my ratings out of 5 for the TARDIS. I'm going to give this 4.5 out of 5. I don't tend to give 5s. I know it's one of my favourites, but I give it 4.5 out of 5. So that's it. That's my 5. Thank you for all the chat and comments you've had down that side throughout the premiere. If you're seeing this past premiere, the live chat should be down below, and also you can leave a comment as always. The playlist of these 5 will be available, link here and up there, so don't forget to check that out as well if you want to see them in their full glory. As separate little videos. But yeah, that's it for this. Who Month continues next week on the 14th of November at 4 PM GMT with the Reboss operation. Then on the 17th of November at 6 PM GMT, we have the Pirate Planet. Then on the 21st November at 4 PM GMT, we have the Stones of Blood. Then it's the 3 Doctors on the 24th of November at 6 PM GMT. And then the Big Finish reviews start. The 28th of November at 4 PM GMT is a review of The Silence of Time. And as you may have been told on the channel update, I'll remind you here as well, Big Finish becomes part of the review cycle going forward. So basically it'll be the 3rd review that happens on the channel. So yeah, there's a bit of fun coming up very soon about that. More details about what the schedule intentions are in the channel update. And I'll probably mention the stream stop to the beginning of December as well. But If you like this video, don't forget to like it and share it with the hashtag teamstructor. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you know when a new video comes out. General, new video every Sunday at 4 PM GMT. I will see you next week with That Doctor and the Ribos Operation. And that finger didn't go anywhere. There we are, That Doctor and the Rebos Operation. I keep saying Ribos, it's Rebos Operation. But until then, thanks guys for watching and I'll see you later.